The windshield wipers beat furiously against the deluge, smearing more water than they cleared. My knuckles whitened around the steering wheel as I leaned forward, peering through the rain-spattered glass. The dashboard clock blinked 6:47 p.m. I'd been on the road for nearly 8 hours, most of it through the worst spring storm I'd ever seen. But none of it mattered. It was Mother's Day, and for the first time in 4 years, I was going home. I hadn't seen my mom since the falling out, not in person anyway. We'd spoken in fragmented, strained phone calls, birthdays, holidays, the occasional obligatory check-in. But after Dad passed, things got complicated. Grief made strangers out of us. I left for college in Chicago and didn't come back. She stayed in the old house in Kingston, Tennessee, buried in memories, clinging to them like a raft in a storm, much like the one I was driving through now. I glanced at the passenger seat. The bouquet was a little battered, roses, her favorite, and the white box beside it contained her beloved strawberry shortcake from that bakery in town she used to love. I called in a favor to get it shipped overnight, picked it up on the way out. The plan was simple: show up unannounced, ring the bell, and hug her. Maybe cry a little, maybe say the things we hadn't for years. It was cheesy, it was cliché, but it was time. The rain didn't let up for a second. Semis kicked up curtains of water that made my little hatchback tremble. Every mile I drove, I thought about her alone in that house. The creak of the front steps, the scent of lemon cleaner, the ticking of that ancient cuckoo clock in the hallway. It all played in my memory like a faded film reel. When I finally pulled off I-75 and onto the winding country road toward Kingston, it was almost 8:15 p.m. The clouds had darkened to a bruised purple, and lightning stitched the sky every few seconds. My headlights carved out a narrow tunnel through the darkness. I knew every bend, every tree along the route. Nothing had changed. Not out here. Just past Miller's Pond, I saw it. The weathered white mailbox with the faded red flag. R. Delaney, still painted on the side. I turned into the gravel driveway, heart thudding like a drum in my chest. There it was. Home. The porch light was off, but a soft glow came from the kitchen window. I parked, grabbed the bouquet and cake box, and stepped out into the rain. My shoes squelched in the muddy gravel, the storm soaking me instantly. I jogged to the porch, climbed the 3 old wooden steps, and stood in front of the door. Her door. The same wreath from 4 Christmases ago still hung there, sun-bleached and tattered. I hesitated. Then I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. "Mom?" I called. "It's me! It's Ryan!" I tried the door handle. It creaked open. My breath caught. A rush of childhood scents hit me. Lavender, cinnamon, old wood. The house hadn't changed. The kitchen was still to the right, the dining room straight ahead. Photos lined the hallway. I glimpsed our family trip to Myrtle Beach, my kindergarten graduation, Dad grinning behind a grill. "Mom?" I said again, stepping inside. My wet shoes squeaked against the hardwood. Then I heard it. A soft laugh. A woman's laugh. But it wasn't my mother's. I froze, heart hammering, and walked slowly toward the kitchen. The door was ajar, and the warm light spilled into the hallway. I pushed it open, and stopped cold. There, standing by the counter, with a half-filled wineglass in her hand, was a woman I didn't recognize. She turned when she saw me, startled, confused, maybe early 30s, stylish, with a cascade of curly dark hair and a fitted blazer. Behind her, a man I hadn't seen in over a decade leaned against the fridge, holding a spatula and wearing the dumbest apron I'd ever seen. It said, "Kiss the cook," in bright red letters. I blinked. "Uncle Drew?" He dropped the spatula. "Ryan?" The woman set her wineglass down carefully, like she was bracing for impact. "What? What's going on?" I stammered, soaked to the bone, cake box tilting in one hand, roses drooping in the other. Drew stepped forward, face flushed. "What are you doing here, kid?" "I drove from Chicago to surprise Mom for Mother's Day." An awkward silence stretched between us. The woman cleared her throat. You must be Ryan. I've heard a lot about you. My stomach dropped. Drew rubbed the back of his neck. About that? And that's when I heard it. Footsteps on the stairs. Software slow. Familiar. Mom. She appeared in the hallway doorway in a blue robe and slippers, blinking in confusion at the soaked mess in her foyer. Ryan? I looked at her, then at Uncle Drew, then at the woman beside him. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't just a surprise visit. This was a discovery. The silence was thunderous, almost louder than the storm still roaring outside. My mom stood motionless in the hallway, her hands gently clutched over her chest, like she was holding her breath in her heart. Ryan, she said again, this time softer. The corners of her mouth lifted, but it was the kind of smile people wear when they're not sure if they're happy or terrified. I stepped inside fully, shutting the door behind me. The wind gave one last howl before it thudded closed, sealing us all in this strange reunion. Water dripped from my jacket onto the hardwood floor, each plink echoing in the thick tension. Uncle Drew stepped back, his apron comically at odds with the look of dread on his face. You're soaked, Mom finally said, coming forward and reaching out as if to hug me, but then hesitating. You drove all this way? 8 hours, I nodded, eyes still flicking between her and Drew. Through a monsoon. I didn't know you were coming, she whispered. That was kind of the point, I muttered. Another awkward beat passed before the woman, the stranger, stepped forward with an elegant smile that barely masked her discomfort. I'm Harper, she said, extending a hand. I'm with Drew. I blinked. With him, like dating? Fiancé, actually, Drew said quickly, the word tripping off his tongue. He looked at Mom for backup. We were gonna tell you, Rye. Tell me what? I asked, ice seeping into my voice. That you're engaged? That you're playing house in my childhood kitchen? Harper stepped back slightly, clearly sensing that this wasn't the moment for cordial introductions. I turned back to Mom. Why is he here? I asked. She exhaled slowly. He moved in, a few months ago. You let him move into Dad's house? Mom's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. It's my house too, Ryan. I flinched like she'd slapped me. I'd wanted to come home, to make peace, but instead, I'd walked into a kitchen rearranged with someone else's hands. A life rebuilt without me in it. I brought you these, I said after a long pause, holding out the roses and the cake box like a kid presenting a crayon drawing. Strawberry shortcake, from La Pâtisserie. I remember it was your favorite. Her face softened, and for a moment I saw her. Just her. My mom. Not a stranger in a blue robe beside her late husband's brother. I do love their shortcake, she said, taking the box delicately. I was going to surprise you, I added, a sad laugh escaping my throat. I guess you surprised me first. Harper cleared her throat. I think I'm going to give you all a minute. She looked at Drew and nodded. I'll grab my things and head back to the hotel. You don't have to, Mom said quickly, but Harper was already stepping out of the kitchen. Uncle Drew lingered for a moment. Look, Rye, I know this is weird. I didn't plan for things to happen this way, but it's not what you think. I turned to him, my voice low. You're engaged to my mom's dead husband's brother. I'm not sure what other way there is to think about it. He sighed and followed Harper upstairs. Mom stood quietly in the kitchen. The rain had finally started to lighten outside, and I could hear water dripping from the gutters, like the house was crying too. She walked to the cabinet and took out a plate. Let's cut the cake. I didn't move. Mom, I said, can you please just tell me what's going on? She paused, her back still to me. You remember how hard those first 2 years after your dad died were? Of course I did. I remembered the crying behind closed doors, the unopened mail, the dinner plates that sat untouched on the table. I remembered checking in from Chicago and hearing the ache in her voice, the hollowness. I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. I didn't want to be here, she said quietly. Drew started helping with the house, maintenance, groceries. At first, it was just company. Someone who understood. He'd lost a brother. I'd lost a husband. She turned around, her eyes wet. We didn't plan to fall in love. But we did. It happened slowly. And when it didn't feel like a betrayal. It felt like breathing again. I swallowed hard. And you didn't tell me? You weren't exactly calling every week, she said with a bitter smile. Every time we spoke, it felt like you were talking to a stranger. I didn't know how to handle it either, I admitted. Dad died, and I left. I just couldn't stand being here without him. She looked at me then. Really looked. I didn't just lose my husband, Ryan. I lost my son, too. That cracked something in me. A dam I'd kept intact for 4 years broke, and suddenly I was a kid again, lost in the aftermath of grief, angry at everything and nothing. I just wanted one normal Mother's Day, I said hoarsely. She stepped forward and took my hand. Her palm was warm, steady. We can still have one, she said. Sit down. Let's eat the cake. I sat. She cut 2 slices, poured 2 cups of tea, and we sat at the same old kitchen table. The wallpaper was different. The clock had been replaced. But in that moment, there was something achingly familiar in the way she placed the cake in front of me, like no time had passed at all. We didn't say much for a while, just the clink of forks and the storm finally winding down. Until she said it, almost a whisper. There's something else you need to know. My fork paused midair. Something else, I repeated, glancing up from the half-eaten slice of cake. The strawberry glaze had started to melt into the sponge, dripping down like tears across porcelain. My mother nodded, hands folded on the table, knuckles white. Her teacup sat untouched beside her. Before your father died, there were complications, she said, choosing her words with the care of someone defusing a bomb. He wasn't well for a long time, not just physically. You mean the cancer? She shook her head. No, I mean, emotionally, mentally. That caught me off guard. I leaned in, my attention no longer on the cake, the storm, or the ache in my chest. Mom, what are you saying? She drew in a shaky breath. Your father had another family, a daughter. I blinked. What? She lives in Kansas. He supported her quietly for years. I only found out when I went through his paperwork after he passed. The silence that followed was devastating. It was like someone had opened a trapdoor beneath my feet and let my sense of identity tumble into the void. He cheated on you? I asked. She looked away. Yes, a long time ago, before you were born. And I forgave him, or tried to. He swore it was over. And then life moved on. Until I found the bank transfers, the letters, the birthday cards. I leaned back in my chair, as if trying to put physical space between me and what I was hearing. Why are you telling me this now? Because it explains things. Why I fell apart after he died. Why Drew and I grew close. It wasn't just grief, Ryan. It was betrayal. Everything I believed about my life was shattered, and I had no one to talk to who understood. Except his brother. She winced. I didn't plan that, but Drew had his own resentments. Your father wasn't always kind to him. There was a lifetime of pain between them. My head was spinning. It felt like I had walked into a home that looked familiar, only to find it full of strangers, secrets, and cracks in the foundation. My parents had always seemed solid, not perfect, but united. This was like watching their wedding photo catch fire in slow motion. And this daughter? I asked. Have you met her? No, but I spoke to her. Her name is Leah. Do I have a sister? The words tasted foreign on my tongue. You share blood, she said softly. Whether or not that makes her your sister is up to you. I didn't respond. My chest felt tight. the kind of pressure you feel before a storm breaks. Not outside, but inside. I didn't mean to ruin today, she added, but I saw the way you looked when you walked in. You thought everything had changed, and it had. You just didn't know how much. A clock ticked in the hallway, a creak from the staircase. I wondered if Drew and Harper were eavesdropping, or if they were packing to leave and never return. I pushed my chair back and stood, pacing the kitchen like a tiger in a cage. You should have told me. I didn't know how, she said. You were grieving too. You'd built a life so far away. I thought maybe the truth would only make things worse. I turned to face her. And what about now? What do you want from me? I want my son back, she whispered. Not the one who sends flowers from Chicago. The one who used to sit on the counter while I made pancakes. The one who used to call me every Sunday just to talk. Tears stung the backs of my eyes. That kid died when Dad did. She stood now, walking around the table until she was in front of me. She touched my face, cupping it like she did when I was little and sick. Then maybe it's time to bring him back. Her voice was calm, but it cracked at the edges. We stood like that for a moment, mother and son, both broken in different ways, but somehow still holding the pieces together. I don't know if I can forgive you, I admitted. Then start with trying to understand me, she said. There was a sound behind us, light footsteps, and then Harper appeared in the doorway, suitcase in hand. She looked unsure, like she was interrupting something sacred. I can come back later, she offered. Mom shook her head gently. No, it's okay. Ryan was just leaving. I glanced at her, surprised. She gave me a small, knowing smile. But I hope he comes back tomorrow. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I nodded once, grabbed my keys, and stepped outside. The rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, like fresh soil, like forgiveness waiting just under the surface. I slid into my car, the leather seat still damp from the drive up, and just sat there, watching the windows fog, watching the porch light flicker in the fading dusk. A new family had begun inside that house, but so had a new truth, one that I didn't know how to handle. But maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to handle it all today. I didn't sleep that night. After checking into a small roadside motel, I sat on the edge of the bed with the television playing some rerun sitcom I didn't recognize. My phone buzzed a few times. A missed call from Harper, a text from Mom that simply read, "Thank you for listening." I didn't respond. I just stared at the rain outside the motel window, the way it glittered beneath the parking lot lights like glass shards scattered on asphalt. Dad had another daughter. Mom was in love with his brother. My childhood wasn't what I thought it was. And still, somehow, I found myself driving back toward the house in the morning. Not because I'd forgiven anyone, not yet, but because I needed answers. And maybe because some part of me still longed for home, even if home looked different now. When I pulled into the driveway, Mom was already on the porch, a mug of coffee cupped between her hands. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "Hey," she said as I stepped out of the car. "Morning," I replied. Harper appeared behind her, a shy smile tugging at her lips. "Want breakfast?" I paused, then nodded. "Yeah, thanks." Inside, the kitchen smelled of cinnamon and butter. Mom was flipping pancakes on the griddle while Harper set the table. Everything felt too normal, like the house itself was trying to pretend yesterday hadn't happened. We ate mostly in silence, broken occasionally by small talk about the weather or how I'd slept. But the real conversation lingered unspoken in the space between us. After we finished eating, I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folded paper I'd found in Dad's desk years ago, one of those cryptic birthday cards that didn't make sense at the time. It read, "To my shining star. I'm sorry I can't be there again, but I think of you every day. Love, Dad." "Is this from her?" I asked, placing it on the table. Mom's eyes softened. "Yes. Leah sent it back after he died. Said she didn't want to keep it." "She doesn't want anything to do with us?" She's angry, confused. She thought she was a secret, then learned she was never forgotten. I suppose that messes a person up. I tapped the card. I thought it was for me. I know, Mom said, reaching over to touch my hand gently. I let you believe that. I didn't pull away, but I didn't squeeze back either. So what now? I asked. You and Drew just move in together? She hesitated. No. We're not rushing anything. Harper still doesn't even understand what's happening, and I know this affects you too. It's not about me, I said automatically. But it is, she said, firm. You're my son. Everything is about you to me. That made something in my chest break a little, in the way something can crack and still hold. I leaned back in the chair. Have you talked to Leah lately? Mom looked down. Not in months. She told me she didn't want anything from us, that we were just a chapter in her pain. Maybe I should talk to her. Both Mom and Harper looked at me sharply. You? Mom asked. Why? Because I know what it feels like to learn your family wasn't who you thought they were, I said quietly. And maybe she deserves to hear from someone who gets it. Harper spoke up then, her voice small but steady. You'd really do that? I nodded. I think I need to. After breakfast, Mom gave me Leah's number. I stared at it for nearly an hour in my car, my thumb hovering over the call button. Then, finally, I hit it. It rang 4 times. Then a voice, soft, cautious, answered. Hello? Hi. Leah? This is Ryan. I know who you are, she said flatly. Your mom warned me you might call. I'm not calling to fight. A pause. Then why? Because I found out about you yesterday, and it messed me up. And I figure you've had a lot longer to live with this than I have, so maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm hoping you'll help me make sense of it. She didn't respond right away. Then she said, You want to meet? I blinked. You'd be okay with that? I don't know, she admitted. But maybe it's time. Maybe we both need to stop pretending our dad was perfect. Yeah, I murmured. Yeah, maybe we do. We agreed to meet halfway, in a town called Bell Ridge, 3 hours out. As I started the engine, I saw Mom watching from the front porch, eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before. Hope. Bell Ridge was one of those quiet towns with more antique shops than people. I arrived a little early and parked in front of a weathered cafe with a flickering neon open sign. Inside, the place smelled like roasted beans and old wood. There was a couple seated in the corner, a man with a laptop near the window, and then her. Leah. She looked like Dad. That was the first punch to the gut. Same sharp jawline, same eyes, same slightly crooked smile that didn't show unless she was trying to hide a real emotion. She stood when she saw me. We both hesitated, unsure whether to hug or shake hands or just stare. We settled for a nod. Hi, she said. Hi, I replied. We sat across from each other, the silence stretching, thick and uncertain. A waitress dropped off coffee neither of us ordered. I wrapped my hands around the cup like it was an anchor. You look like him, Leah said after a beat. So do you, I replied. She nodded slowly. I used to hate that. Now I'm not sure what to feel. I sipped the coffee, bitter and lukewarm. Me either. Leah looked out the window. When I was little, I used to pretend he was just on a trip, that he was a spy or a pilot or something. Then I got older and I realized he was just a liar. I thought he was a hero, I said, swallowing hard. He'd sit on the porch and tell me stories about when he met Mom, about how they built the life they always dreamed of. Turns out, that dream left you behind. She didn't flinch, just said, Did he ever talk about me? I shook my head. Not once. Figures. She stirred her coffee slowly, watching the cream swirl like a storm in a cup. You know the worst part? It wasn't that he wasn't around. It was that he made me think I was the problem. Like if I had been better, quieter, smarter, prettier, he would have stayed. My heart ached. You weren't the problem. She looked at me, eyes hard. You don't know that. I don't have to, I said. I know him. Or I thought I did. We sat for a while, letting the silence say what we couldn't. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a photo. This was the last time I saw him. I was 13. He took me to a fair and bought me cotton candy. Then he said goodbye, like he was just going to the bathroom. I waited 2 hours before I realized he wasn't coming back. I stared at the picture. Leah, gangly and smiling wide. A man I knew as my father beside her. Eyes tired. Smile too big to be real. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm sorry he did that to you. She looked at me, and for the first time, her expression softened. Not your fault. You were just lucky enough to be the family he chose to stay with. Even that was a lie, I muttered. We paid for the coffee and stepped outside. The breeze was light. The storm finally passed. There was something almost poetic about the calm, like the world was exhaling with us. I don't want anything from you or your mom, she said as we stood by our cars. But I also don't want to spend the rest of my life hating people I've never met. I nodded. So where does that leave us? She shrugged. Strangers with the same blood. Maybe more if we want. Or maybe that's enough. I reached out, offering my hand. Can we try? She looked at it for a second before shaking it. Trying doesn't mean forgetting. I wouldn't want to forget. Then she smiled, genuinely for the first time. Okay, trying it is. We stood there a little longer, just two people rewriting the narrative we'd been given. No fanfare, no teary reunion, just the slow building of something real. A start. I arrived home just before sunset. The house looked different now, not physically, but in the way a person sees a place once the curtain's been drawn back. Still, it was home. The creak in the porch boards, the rustle of wind through the oak out back, the scent of baked apples seeping from the kitchen window, all of it, still familiar, still mine. Mom was in the garden when I pulled in, kneeling in dirt, gloved hands pruning her rose bushes. She looked up and smiled, tentative, like she wasn't sure if I'd come back angry or worse, cold. You're back? She said. I met her, I replied. Mom straightened slowly, brushing her hands against her jeans. And? She's hurt, but not bitter, honest, sharp. She's everything I never knew I needed to meet. She blinked, lips parting. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I reached into the car and pulled out a small gift bag, one I'd picked up from a roadside market on the way back. Inside was a tiny ceramic angel holding a sunflower. For you, I said, handing it over. I figured you could use a new guardian. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. She clutched the figurine like it was porcelain gold. Thank you. We sat on the porch together, watching the last of the day bleed into dusk. Harper joined us not long after, with lemonade and 3 mismatched glasses. She didn't say much, just curled up on the swing beside me and leaned her head on my shoulder like she used to when we were kids. And for a while, there was peace. Eventually, I broke the quiet. I think I might meet Leah again next weekend. She invited me to a small bookshop she likes. Mom didn't respond immediately. Then, carefully, she asked, Do you want me to come? I think she's not ready for that yet, but maybe one day. She nodded. One day would be nice. Harper sipped her lemonade. She has your laugh, you know. I watched a video once, back when she was trying stand-up. We both looked at her. Sorry, she said. I Googled her years ago. I was curious. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. Because I didn't think you were ready to hear it. Because I wasn't either. I exhaled slowly. Well, now we all know. The wind picked up again, gentle but sure. A cleansing breeze. Mom smiled at the sky, then turned to me. I know this wasn't the Mother's Day you planned. I laughed softly, No, it was supposed to be a surprise. She leaned over and kissed my temple. It still was, just not the kind either of us expected. We sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to dot the sky, the kind of silence that spoke volumes. I thought about the long drive, the rain, the moment I turned that doorknob and walked into a different truth than the one I'd known. And then, I remembered something Dad used to say, something he told me once after a particularly bad grade school fight. People are never just one thing, son. They're mistakes and memories, choices and chances. The good doesn't erase the bad, but the bad doesn't erase the good either. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to remember the good. The nights he tucked me in, the sound of his laugh when I told a bad joke, the time he spent 3 hours fixing my bike chain just to watch me ride in circles. He had failed, terribly, deeply, shamefully, but he had also loved me in the only way he knew how. And now it was my turn to choose how I'd carry that legacy. Which pieces to keep, which ones to let go. I think I'm going to visit him, I said aloud. Mom looked over. The cemetery? Yeah, I need to say some things. Maybe I'll invite Leah, or not. But I think I need to. She nodded. Tell him I miss him, and that I wish he'd done better. I will. The porch light flickered on, casting a warm glow around us. Harper started humming a song, some old folk tune from Mom's record collection, and Mom closed her eyes like she was savoring it. Mother's Day had come and gone in a way no one expected. But maybe, just maybe, it turned into something more than flowers and brunches and picture frames. It had become a reckoning, a reunion, a rewriting of the story we thought we knew. And as the stars blinked brighter above us, I knew one thing for certain. I had walked in with secrets, storms, and sorrow. But I was leaving this day with something else. Clarity, family, and the start of a new truth, one worth holding on to. Have you ever celebrated Mother's Day with unexpected incident before? If this story resonates with you, hit the like button and leave your story in the comment section. And of course, subscribe to my channel for more real, raw, and ridiculous stories. Till then, stay safe and happy.